Hey guys, we're here with another Foundations video where we're gonna talk about some things to think about to form your approach when playing lead parts on electric guitar in a worship set. Playing lead guitar can either be one of the easiest things to know how to do or the hardest thing, as there are a lot of songs that have very clear lead parts to play and many that don't. That can lead to a couple of things. The first being a feeling of aimlessness that leads you to simply sit out and wait for the next scheduled part to come around. And the second being a huge difference in the way that parts that are already present in a song and parts that you come up with yourself sound. In order to help you feel more comfortable as a guitar player in moments that are a little less defined, we're going to talk about when to fill space with lead parts, some go-to intervals and progressions to get you started, and even how you can apply these principles with a slide. For most of the songs that we play, we will typically have a pretty well-defined set of lead parts to play in half of the choruses and bridges and the occasional verse. The feel of the song sections that don't have a super clear job for us as guitar players is typically lower energy and more open. There aren't a ton of things going on and filling up every single beat of every measure. And this is good because it gives us a lot of freedom in picking our moments. And picking moments is the most important aspect of effectively filling space with lead parts. As we all progress as guitar players, we should start to realize that our playing actually increases in impact as the amount of time we play decreases. So don't feel like you have to be playing at all times if there isn't a defined part for you in the moment, because you don't need to play at all times to be effective. In fact, I'm going to suggest that in an average measure of music that a band plays, the electric guitar is most effective when playing 25% of the time or less. Now, how did I arrive at that number? If you listen to a modern worship song or a hymn, there's a pattern by which each instrument plays their part in shaping a mix. So for example, in a 4/4 song, drums and bass typically establish the low-end rhythm on the one beat, and keys will help on the one beat a bit, but really fill in the space on the 2 and 3 beats. And the electric guitar will provide a transition to the next measure on the 4 beat with some type of lead line. It's like a constant cycle of each instrument handing things off to another band member. And for the most part, even if a song isn't in 4/4, the principle is still pretty solid. Let me demonstrate a verse of Living Hope applying this timing principle. Even though I was hitting some notes on the 1 beat and slightly before the 4 beat of some of the measures, I was trying to stick pretty close to the 4 beat or later to play the main part, and that I also didn't play at the end of every single measure. And this is because I wanted every part to be as effective as possible without being repetitive. If you're having trouble figuring out when to fill space with lead parts, use these principles as a starting point. Now that we have a starting point for when to play, let's establish a starting point for what to play. As we mentioned earlier, filling space with a lead line a lot of times will provide a transition to the next measure. So we want to make sure that what we play sounds good where the band is currently playing, while also adequately looking ahead to what's next. With 3 to 4 notes, we can craft some really tasteful parts that transition us nicely into our next measure. There are a ton of different options that we can use, and the only specific guiding principle is to do your best not to land on the root of the chord that the band goes into to start a measure. For example, if I'm in the key of D and we're going into a measure that starts on a G chord, I want to do my best as a lead guitar player not to land on a G note with my part. Remember that bass and keys are establishing that on the 1 beat, so you can fill in the space with another interval. We've talked a lot about creating focus in our playing in other videos, relying heavily on the firsts and fifths of the root chord of the song to influence our decisions, and that applies here as well. With that in mind, let's revisit that same verse of Living Hope and try out some lead parts. Crafting lead parts this way is a great way for you to find your voice as a guitar player. So pay special attention to what you gravitate towards when playing in these spaces. Do you like to fall down to the third interval when transitioning from a 1 to a 4 chord? Do you like to throw in some second intervals? These are all important things to know that are unique to your playing style. Before we wrap up this video, I'd love to take a second and demonstrate some of these principles on a slide. Now, slides are awesome to use if you want to change the mood of a part to sound a little more smooth, and they really shine on a lot of modern worship songs, especially modern hymns. The only real change in my approach on a slide is that I will try to accent 2 notes in my parts, the starting note and the note that I slide up to. And it's that simple. I'm even going to use the exact same wet effects as I would for my normal lead sound, so I don't have to change anything there. So let's take one more look at the verse of Living Hope, and I'll play similar parts to the previous section to see how the slide changes the feel. We hope that this video has been helpful to you in providing some guidelines and direction for filling space with your own lead parts in your worship sets. And if you have any questions about this content, please feel free to reach out to us at worship@grace-bible.org, and we'll see you next time.